Let's talk about budget resolution and COVID relief. The Democrats, they narrowly, and I do mean they narrowly passed a resolution that essentially allows them the ability to pass our next round of stimulus relief without the Republicans. And it's through this process called reconciliation. Now, well, let me kind of clarify something here because um, I'm a little frustrated, quite frankly. We have been hearing since the passage of this resolution that will allow for reconciliation. We've been hearing a lot of disgruntled Republicans talk about how horrible it is, how anti bipartisan it is, how basically un American it is to use reconciliation to accomplish the goal of actually sufficiently effectively and efficiently addressing the American people's need for COVID-19 economic stimulus and relief. But let me make something very clear here. Reconciliation is something that Republicans, while they try and act like it's never been done before, and they express total shock and awe about it, and they clutch their pearls and they're like, how dare you, right? They used it pretty recently to do what? To pass tax cuts. Tax cuts that, mind you, a majority of you probably don't benefit from, at least directly. And if you do indirectly, like, it's so indirect, you don't even feel it, right? And not just with that, but they've used reconciliation many times before. Case in point, reconciliation is not new to them. It, my friends, is very utterly true to the Republican Party. So don't believe their hype when they clutch their pearls and they like, oh my gosh, how dare you, reconciliation, right? Like, they'll shut up, right? You do it all the time. So, anyhow, remember in part one, if you did listen to it, and if you did not, I highly encourage you to go back and take a listen to it. In part one of this series, and again, this is the second part. Part one, I talked about Georgia and the Senate runoffs that happened there, and President Biden and the Democrats and Trump and the $2,000 checks. And we talked about the Democrats and Biden essentially begging Georgians to help them. They're like, please help us, please, Georgia. Right? I can't sing, so I'm not gonna even try. But they were trying to woo Georgia, right? They were like, look at, okay, anyway, let me not even go there. So they really begged Georgia to make America great again, right? We need you to make America great again because Georgia, with you, we can pull some gangster moves and we can make this happen for America. Why was Georgia so important? What exactly did they want to do with Georgia? Well, I'm not going to get too far into this because you should have listened on part one. And if you haven't, please go back and listen to it. Essentially, Georgia had two senators, Perdue and Loeffler, and the two of them were essentially up for re-election. And those two seats made the difference between Mitch McConnell and the Republicans still holding the Senate, ultimately not allowing anything to get voted on, yada, yada, yada. We talked about, the Grim Reaper. If you don't know what or who I'm talking about when I talk about the Grim Reaper, yes, there is one in Congress, and check out part one to find out who he is, right? But those two senators were the difference between the Grim Reaper and two new senators that would essentially shift control, again, narrowly shift control back to the Democrats. Not because the Democrats would have more senators in the actual Senate, but because it would essentially give Vice President Kamala Harris the ability to cast in various situations, if needed, a tie-breaking vote, which the vice president has the right and the responsibility, quite frankly, to do in the Senate. And so that considered, again, not getting all wonky or rehashing part one, yet again for the umpteenth time. Go check it out if you haven't already done so. We saw for the, right up close and personal, why this was important for the Democrats then and why it's important now. Because with the power that Kamala Harris now has, given the current 50-50 split, because Georgia was taken by 2 new Democrats and taken away and yanked back from the Republicans, Kamala Harris was able to cast this tie-breaking vote, essentially giving final approval in the Senate for reconciliation that the Democrats wanted. And again, I mentioned earlier, reconciliation is a way that a bill can be passed, a bill related to the American Rescue Plan. I'm sorry, I just totally, I hate when I look away and then I totally lose my train of thought. You would think that I don't, but it's actually quite easy for me to lose my train of thought. But anyways, I will not look away again. So reconciliation was needed because with it, again, they could essentially let the Republicans sit by themselves, not have to go through the whole negotiation debacles that they have constantly gone through, not just in COVID relief negotiations, but pretty much in every other negotiation that has ever happened with Republicans, right? And so, hey, reconciliation was the key to solve the negotiation problems that Democrats have with Republicans. Stalemate would be ended, and quite frankly, the inaction that we saw in the 116th Congress would not be an issue for us in the 117th Congress. Assuming that, again, as we talked about in several episodes ago, I don't remember exactly which one, but you have to have a situation where every Democrat agrees to fall in line in order for you to utilize the powers of the vice president in the Senate. So look, here's the deal. When the resolution, right, it was passed in the Senate and then it went to the House, do you think there was any opposition there, right? This resolution that had every Democrat in the Senate, and it was able to pass with a tie vote from the vice president, and it was sent to the House, which is controlled and has been controlled now for some time by the Democrats and, the party of Nancy Pelosi. Do you think it would get to the House and have any issues and be opposed in any way, shape, or form? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Well, my friends, of course, any Republicans, all Republicans in the House, although the House is controlled by Democrats, they don't just it's not all Democrats, right? You had Republicans there say, hey, we oppose this. We're not going for this. But then in addition to them, there was also a Democrat named Jared Golden. He was the only Democrat to buck the trend and join the Republicans in opposition to this resolution to allow for reconciliation. Now, he claimed, I'm not going to get all into this, but his claim behind doing so was that he had a preference for separating this vaccine bill from really everything else instead of going through this kind of longer reconciliation process. I will say, though, I'm not going to get into whether I agree with that or not, but it is true that reconciliation, when compared to the normal way to pass a bill, it's a lot longer. The process is longer. So he is right in that respect. But he has his claims that I'm not going to speak to because that's on him.